Call to order the October 12th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. Liz, would you take a roll?
Yep. Commissioner Urbanski,
Here.
Lacey, Riley,
Here.
Olson, Gory,
Here.
Baswa,
Here.
Austin,
Here.
and Chairperson Brass.
Here. Okay. Next, we will adopt the agenda. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda? Everyone's good with that?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. And brings us to visitor presentation. If there is someone that would like to address the commission that isn't already on the agenda, we do that now. And then is there people online?
There is, but there's no one raising their hand.
Okay. And so we close visitor presentation and move on to approve the previous meeting minutes. Everyone have a chance to review those? Can I get a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. And that would bring us to our first consent item. Liz?
Well, actually, the consent items don't require a discussion around
that's
those.
right.
So you actually just do one motion, or a first and a second on the entire consent agenda, unless there's
Sure.
questions.
Okay. For both or for each one?
Yep, so they kind of go together as a package. It's just consent agenda, so you can ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda, and that would take care of both of them.
Gotcha.
You can allow for that opportunity for comment or questions for all the commissioners before, that's accepted.
Okay, so before I make a motion, is there any comments or questions from the commission on the consent agenda? No? Okay, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda items.
Can I second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So that will bring us to the action items. Liz for 7A.
All right, thank you, members of the Planning Commission. This presentation is probably going to be fairly short, but this is for Hidden Maples, their final plat application with the city. The parcel that's being looked at for this final plat is located in downtown Chaska. It's on the eastern portion of the downtown area, off of Maple Street North and flanked by 6th Street East. From a planning process perspective, we're at the third and final step of the process, so they're at final plat in this stage. To give a little bit of a background, so this item originally came forward at our September 14th Planning Commission, which was last month's meeting. It was requested to be tabled so that the developer could work on the remaining house designs for the development. So the developer has taken that time to produce other house designs for the development. So those are attached in your packet, a part of this Planning Commission meeting. They did provide 8 total designs ranging from ramblers, 2-story, 2-car garage, and 3-car garage options. And the reason they've provided a multitude of designs is because as building permits come in, that's when they'll start to define the details with each of those homes. So this will be kind of a pickings that clients can pick from, although some of those designs may change in some way or another as clients are kind of finalizing their design with the builder. But in essence, the ones that were provided in the packet give you a feel of the type of product that would be implemented out there. They did do some revisions to some of the designs they did just to complement downtown Chaska. So some of the designs incorporate smaller roof profiles, such as hip roofs and front porches to bring in some of those downtown elements and scale. And overall, the designs that they do provide in that package do meet our city ordinance. We also wanted to give an update on the park since there was a question and comment towards that in the last meeting. Just wanted to provide a reminder and update towards the park and what it used to be. Being that this site in particular held a park that was owned by the school district. So they had ownership since several years ago and have used it as a park. They did decide to sell the site around 2019, and at that time, they did offer the city the first right of refusal on the sale of the land. So giving the city the first crack at purchasing the property if we were interested. So back in 2019, when we were provided that capability, the Park and Rec Commission did review the possibility of acquiring the park. So they did discuss that at several of their meetings back in 2019. They did come to the determination that the park was not going to be pursued by the city. They wanted to focalize their attention to the St. John's property to develop a neighborhood park, which is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan as well as the downtown master plan for parks in that area. Discussion has been ongoing with the church over the years with all parties, generally in agreement with the direction of where the park is supposed to go and financing and timing when that's applicable and appropriate. Recently, there was a substantial donation made to the St. John's Church to help facilitate the park locating on their property. So those conversations between all parties still are ongoing with St. John's and producing the park within their property. The Parks and Rec Commission and the City Council will continue to talk about this and advise staff on the process. And then just wanted to bring up a slide of some of the designs that were provided. This doesn't show all of them, but gives you a little taste for some of the product that they are proposing. So again, the request that they're asking for this evening is for final plat of a 4 single-family lot subdivision within downtown Chaska. The zoning is R2, so they didn't do a rezoning as a part of the subdivision. It will meet the minimum standards for R2 zoning, which is a medium-density residential zoning district. That use and zoning also meets the comprehensive plans guidance for this property. And then this is the layout. Again, not getting into too much detail here, but the 4 lots would face out towards Maple Street. Their driveways would also provide access out onto Maple Street as well. And then these will be homes with no basements, so they'll be slab-on-grade homes and have ability for 2 and 3 car stalls on some of the lots. So with that, we are asking you to make a motion this evening to recommend approval of the final plat for Hidden Maples, and then based on the conditions that are listed in the staff report. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Liz. I guess with that, we'll start with the commission. Is there any questions for the city from any of our members? Okay. Anyone have any questions for us or anything they'd like to say in the audience, the developer? Nope. And I assume nobody online, just checking.
I don't see anyone.
Okay. With that, would anyone like to make a motion?
Well, I just did some discussion, for the commissioner's sake and for the record. I voted no at the concept, and I voted no at preliminary, and I'm going to vote no, here again. And, I think the city, and I'm the first, I like to think I'm the first to tell, put it on record when I think the city's been successful, and they get an A, and there's lots of those. But I think that this is a case where I think the city staff, our city council, and our park board get an F, big F, Phil, that, to eliminate a park, we can dissect it and say it's not the city's fault. It was the school district, which was, they were having to find money because the referendum failed. We can, kind of pass it off, and which has happened here. It's not my problem. But the fact is, though, that a public park was eliminated, and it doesn't matter whether it was the city's or the school district's fault, that they did it. And it's been 3 years since it was eliminated. It's 2019, it's now 2022. So the irony here is that we've eliminated a public park, and we're putting 4 houses on it, that hopefully are going to have families in them, kids, and which is exactly what we need in our downtown, because I think the downtown is probably a desert of families right now. I think that this is, a failure of government. It's not a life or death failure, but it's certainly a failure of government. I'm going to vote no again, and I think that if this were any other area of Chaska, if this were my neighborhood, every single meeting there'd be 200 people in here. This place would be jam-packed. And the fact that this is the city, this is actually a symptom of the downtown. The fact that there's not 200 people here and there's been a public park eliminated is what we're seeing, and we've just made it worse. So that's my little spiel. I wanted to go on record so everyone knew exactly where I stood, and I'm going to vote no.
Appreciate that. Thanks for the feedback. I apologize. Didn't mean to carry the motion before before discussion. A little getting off the rust here. Anyone else have any discussion amongst ourselves? No? Okay. It's been to commission a couple of times now, so I think we're familiar with the project. I will look for if anyone would like to make a motion.
I'll make a motion to recommend City Council approval of final plat for Hidden Maples, subject to the following 11 conditions.
Is there a second?
I second.
A second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carries. And then with that, Liz, we'll go to 7B. Go to 7B.
I'm sorry. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Yep.
All right, thank you, members of the Planning Commission. We have another final in front of us this evening for the Hazeltine Plaza Apartments being proposed by Trident Development. They are coming forward with a final site and building plan and zoning ordinance amendments for the project. The site is located within the Hazeltine Plaza Commercial District. It's highlighted in red in this aerial being shown on the slide here. The commercial district is encompassed by Kohl's, Park Dental, Aldi's, Chipotle, Starbucks, and McDonald's. You have Hunter Mark Road on the east side and then Hazeltine Boulevard on the north side. So as mentioned before, we have a 3-step process. We're at the 3rd and final step for this project. In terms of the previous approvals that have been done for this project in particular, the concept plan was reviewed back in March of this year, and it was approved at that time for the apartment project. The preliminary came back in August of this year for the preliminary site and building plan and a zoning ordinance amendment to PCD 15 to allow for multifamily residential within that district. During those discussions, there were a couple comments that came out of that phase in the project. One of them, the applicant was requesting utility brick to be classified as a Class 1 material on their 4-story apartment building. And during that time, there was support from the city council and others on allowing for utility brick to be on the 4-story apartment building. So they did support that and emphasized to work with that moving into the final. Also at that time, we noted that the final approvals would require an ordinance amendment for the utility brick if that was supported. We also noted that either ordinance amendments or variances would be needed for the building setbacks and the Florida area ratio being proposed for the site to meet the PRD, Planned Residential District standards for a residential use in a PCD district. At that time, the city council more so expressed the support of the project and believed that the project should be processed as proposed due to the fact that the design and the scale fit within the commercial district it was going into. They also expressed a desire to pursue a solution other than a variance if possible. And because of that commentary that was received, staff is recommending a more narrow and tailored ordinance amendment approach rather than variances for this project. So the current request this evening is for final site and building plan, and that would be for the market rate rental apartment complex containing 112 dwelling units. And then also a part of the request would be 2 zoning ordinance amendments. One of them would be a zoning ordinance amendment to PCD 15, which would allow for the utility brick to be classified as a Class 1 material on a 4-story apartment building. The other zoning ordinance amendment would be to Section 15.16030, which is the PCD zoning ordinance. Within the PCD zoning ordinance, it does refer to Section 15.16020 for the PRD development standards for residential uses that locate within a PCD zoning district. So the amendment that's being proposed would be to eliminate the requirement of PRD building setbacks and the Florida area ratio for residential uses in PCDs. And with the elimination of those, the building setbacks and FAR can still be specified within a PCD district. So it doesn't mean that there's no building setbacks or there's no FAR necessarily to a residential use within a PCD. It just means that it would default to the building setbacks that are defined in a PCD district or FAR in a PCD district. The elimination would not include the density, lot coverage, building site design, and common open space standards that are still applicable to residential within PCDs. So this amendment would merely eliminate the building setbacks and FAR requirement within PCDs for residential uses. And as we get into kind of the specifics of this project and how it relates to building setbacks and FAR, just for you to understand kind of where it's at, from a building setback standpoint, it does meet the PCD 15 building setbacks that are defined within that district. But looking at the building setbacks that are defined in the PRD standards, it does not meet that in reference to how tall the building is, which is at 43 feet. So the nearest setback that they're proposing within their own lot lines, the least amount is 20 feet from the nearest property line. And then from a Florida area ratio side of things, their proposal is 0.68 when you take the square footage and divide it by the square footage of the lot itself. And the Florida area ratio within PRD notes a 0.5 FAR. As it relates to the other remaining standards within there, so density, lot coverage, and common open space, this project does meet all three of those. Just to touch on a little bit for the final site plan here, not much has changed since preliminary. The building is still at 112 units and 4 stories in height. The parking, they have 237 stalls within their site, which meets the parking requirement for this building. They'll have 106 surface stalls and then 131 underground stalls. There was a note last time to work on a pedestrian connection near the breezeway, as there wasn't one before, so they have included an additional pedestrian crossing just west of the breezeway for people utilizing the surface parking lot to the south of the main entrance. In addition to that, they'll implement other safety procedures like signage and convex mirrors to help with people coming in and out of this breezeway so that they see pedestrians and vice versa. And all other site planning components like landscaping, usable open space, lighting, stormwater are all being met with this plan. And then these are the building elevations. The building itself will be composed of glass, LP SmartSide, utility brick, and split face block. The brick will fit in with some of the other buildings within this commercial district, as they will include a Chaska colored brick, and then also do a flat roof concept as well, which would also fit in with the other buildings of this commercial district. And then just a couple renderings if we need to refer back to them. So we are asking you to make 3 motions this evening. One motion would be to recommend approval of the final site and building plan for the Hazeltine Plaza Apartments. The second motion would be to recommend approval of the zoning ordinance amendment to PCD 15 to allow utility brick as a Class 1 material for 4-story apartment buildings. And then a motion to recommend approval of the zoning ordinance amendment to section 15.16.030, the PCD district, to eliminate PRD building setbacks and FAR standards for residential uses and PCDs. Happy to answer any questions. We also have the applicant in the room as well, if you have questions for them.
Thanks, Liz. And to clarify ahead of time, before we discuss and everything, it's 3 separate motions.
3 separate motions, yep.
Thanks, great. So when we get to that, can you leave that up there? That's
Yes.
easy to see there, yep.
And I also want to note that there is a public hearing with this
Right, yep.
request as well.
So we, first I'll ask the commission if there's any questions for city staff.
Yeah, I have a couple. And so I wasn't here when this came up originally. So, so the breezeway concept, yeah, so like with cars, like they try to act like birds. So they try to take the shortest path. So the breezeway, like what just strikes me is cut through traffic for people coming off of 100 Mark and going to Coles and back and forth through that area. Was that talked about during the last review? Just of how that, whether this is actually a good idea, and what this breezeway tries to accommodate, and
Yeah, and to a certain extent, it was discussed previously. The reason they have to do the breezeway is to keep that access point open. So Kohl's is pretty adamant about keeping that access point open. In fact, they actually have ruling authority, for lack of better words, to be able to dictate what happens with those access points. So this was kind of a solution, so to speak, to adhere to the standards that Kohl's needed.
And approved by Kohl's too,
Right.
correct?
Yep.
but convex mirrors, like, so how much traffic's going to go through there? I mean, is this something that is really a good idea? Yeah, has it been thought through? You know, how many times a day is that convex mirror going to be relied upon for a pedestrian car safety interaction?
Yeah, if I may, the breezeway was something that was proposed at concept and we had a lot of discussion about it at that point, and whether it was appropriate or not. That concept plan was approved by both Planning Commission and Council. It remained the breezeway as proposed at concept at preliminary, and it was reviewed at that stage as well. And there was a lot of support expressed by Planning Commission and Council for this project at that stage. And so, you know, that breezeway is continued through the process. Now, as part of one of the things that we've looked at is, you know, the parking and the traffic circulation, and, you know, the site design has been, there's some intentional elements in there as far as trying to create separation from, and, you know, via sight lines and feel, right? So that folks who are using that breezeway and that access to get to Kohl's understand that they're driving through a residential area. They're not supposed to be using that, you know, the parking for the residential area, and they're getting through. There were also some design elements that were done for that crosswalk in particular, and also the other crosswalk that I think is, I'm trying to get my cardinal directions, west of there on this site, to demarcate that, to make it clear that it's there so that it's visible. Our city engineer has also been involved in looking at sight lines and things like that for the cars that are going through and approaching that intersection. So it's been pretty thoroughly vetted at this point. It is a unique element, but it's also not something that's unheard of. There's other examples of similar breezeways elsewhere in the Twin Cities. There's also an example in Chaska of a breezeway. A little bit different situation, but it's now called the Zen Apartments downtown. There is a breezeway off of, is that 3rd Street? No, 1st Street. To get off of 1st Street into the inner parking lot that's there, and you can actually get to 2nd Street from there as well. There's an auto dealer that you can access through that breezeway, is in addition to Michael's Bike Shop, through that breezeway too, so.
Yeah, I think I was going to add the developer is here, and I believe, if I recall, he had mentioned that they themselves actually have a couple different developments with this breezeway concept. Is that correct, or did I understand that wrong?
They provided some conceptual ideas. I'm not sure that they actually implemented those themselves, but he can probably speak to that, yeah.
I thought I recall you're with the developer.
With Trident Development?
Yeah,
Yes, I'm
right.
Roger Fink,
Yeah.
Principal of Trident Development. So, Mr. Commissioner and Planning Commission members, this will be the first breezeway that we've built with allowed traffic underneath it. So we engaged an architect, Cost Wilson Architects from Bloomington, who have experience in designing and detailing safe breezeways such as this. They've got at least 2 other projects that they've designed and that are in operation now, one in Eden Prairie and one in Minneapolis, I believe. So just to add on to what Nate was saying about the design elements of that, we've added a speed bump for incoming traffic as they approach that breezeway off of Hunter Mark to slow them down. We've added railings on each side of the drive-through lanes so that pedestrians aren't tempted to cross the traffic while under the breezeway. So we've got railings there to control that. We'll have another sign saying, watch for oncoming traffic, another sign saying, watch for crossing pedestrians. The convex mirror is just another added safety feature to hopefully be able to catch your eye if there's a pedestrian or an oncoming vehicle. And then we've got the crosswalk feature as well that's delineated on the drive itself. So we tried to think of everything possible to make it as safe as possible for that traffic. Liz is correct. Kohl's would not let this project go forward if we weren't able to keep open that driveway. I'm sure you all probably assume, as we do, that the bulk majority of the retail traffic that comes into the Kohl's store is coming off of Hazeltine and 41. So while this does get some traffic, and we expect it will, it certainly won't be the volume that's expected to come from the other entrance points.
Mm-hmm.
Did that help?
Yeah, thank you. I also want to add to that, when Mr. Fink is saying that there's the bulk of the traffic is coming at that north access off of Hazeltine Boulevard and 41 there. There was a traffic analysis done, so that's not an assumption. That is something that was measured through this process as well and studied.
Okay, all right, thanks. My other question was just relative to precedents, because this location is, to me, it's commercial, and so, how, like, what we end up hearing as a commission is, when somebody tries to put a building like this within a residential neighborhood is, well, they did it up by, the Quick Trip, and, it's going to be, okay, they did it up by Kohl's, how does that affect those future conversations with precedents? So if you could just shed some light on that.
So, just to clarify, are you asking?
Setbacks, and then the floor area.
Okay,
floor area
and how does that
ratio.
set precedent?
Yeah, so
Okay.
how as a commission do we absorb that future argument and respond to it and consider it?
So the change
what's
that's being
happening here.
proposed, yep, the change that's being proposed in the ordinance is very targeted and limited here. This is a very unique project where it's a residential multifamily that's being proposed within a planned commercial district. Right now, the planned commercial district for residential project references the planned residential district standards for setback, floor area ratio, site coverage ratio, usable open space, common open space, and building design. And so what we're proposing here is a limited ordinance amendment that would remove the reference specifically to the planned residential district guideline for a requirement, right, for setback and floor area ratio. That's it. So the requirements will remain for the usable open space, site coverage ratio, and the design elements that are cited in the planned residential district. And this change will only apply when there's a multifamily being proposed to be built within a planned commercial district specifically. So it's pretty limited.
Okay.
There's not a lot of planned commercial districts in Chaska today. The ones that do exist, other than this one, are fully built out. And so there's really not a whole lot of opportunity for this to occur elsewhere except through a redevelopment, in which case that would need to come in front of you all for review anyway, right? Because that'd be a change in use. So, the opportunity for this precedent to sort of build upon itself, I would say, is pretty limited.
Okay.
I also think it's important to understand, at least from staff's perspective in our analysis, I think we've learned this is a little bit of a new idea, right? Creating a multifamily project within a commercial district. At least it's new for Chaska. I think it's newer in the Twin Cities also, over the last decade or so, right? Where people are feeling like, having that lifestyle that comes along with living in a commercial district is desirable. Having that opportunity to walk to, in this situation, Aldi's, Starbucks, McDonald's, Chipotle is there. I think people see that as a desirable opportunity. And so in recognizing that, I think is a little bit of a new phenomenon, right? And so I think what we're finding here is that through this process, we're learning that the way that our districts are currently written didn't really necessarily have that thought in mind. I don't know that it was necessarily at the time that they were developed, the district guidelines and regulations were developed, thought that it was likely there would be a multifamily product that was going to be coming and wanting to interact in this way. And so I think what we're learning here is that it makes sense to tweak it a little bit. And the way that we're proposing these changes to the ordinance is really focused on the scale components of what the planned residential district is getting at through the floor area ratio and the setback. And we've talked a lot through this process about how we think it makes sense that this building fits within the scale of what is around it. And we talk about that a lot in a lot of the developments that we do, right? Regardless of what the district is. And I think there's been agreement that the scale of this building makes sense given the other things that exist around it. But at the same time, recognizing that we want to make sure that this property is respected as a residence, and it's going to be a place where people are living. And so it should meet those needs too. Someone should be able to have a space to take their dog out or throw a Frisbee or a football around. And so this project is providing those amenities. And I think what protects that and what's going to continue to require that in a similar situation are those other elements that we're leaving intact in that reference to the planned residential district, right? That usable open space, lot coverage, those things get more towards the livability components, whereas where we're removing that reference, that's getting at that scale component, because we're not building in a residential context here, we're building in a commercial context.
Good, thank you.
Yep.
I was going to think that was really well explained, and then to add on to that is the idea of uniquely kind of fine-tuning, surgically amending the ordinance versus a broad variance, which would set a precedent. Because then someone could say, oh, well, you gave a variance for this over here, it's the same over here, versus this unique specific project in a unique zoning environment, which probably would not replicate. It'd be a long time if it were to replicate itself. I think it makes sense.
If you've been to Ridgedale Mall at all lately, they've done this down there. They've got, I think, 2 or 3 residential projects down there, and it's really created some vibrancy down there.
Yeah.
And got rid of just, parking lot as far as you can see type thing. So it's a nice way to get younger families into communities and
Did it in
such.
Southdale too.
As well as people that are downsizing but want to stay next to restaurants and be able to walk to Cub Foods or Target and that type of stuff. So it's a trend that's taking place right now, and I like this project.
Did you have something?
Uniqueness.
Okay. Any other is there any discussion more amongst ourselves? Any questions for the applicant? Maybe I didn't, because he just came up. I guess I'll open the public hearing. Like to say
So
anything?
you want to state the time that you.
Yeah, it's 7:38. We'll open the public hearing.
I'll take advantage of the public hearing.
All right.
Already introduced myself. Mainly, I just want to say thank you to the staff. Chaska planning staff has been brilliantly navigating the complexities of this application, and I really appreciate their direction and guidance in helping us manage this process. So I think I did a really good job of that, and you should be proud of them. Also, I want to introduce my wife in the audience tonight, my wife Diana. I've been doing this public hearing city presentation business for 20-something years, 25 years, and it's the first time she's ever come along, so. You did a great job in showing her how the process works, too, so.
We're honored.
Anyway.
The question is this the last time she's ever coming along?
I think it might be. Anyway, I would support your recommendation on this project, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to address the commission in the public hearing?
We have someone online. We have
Oh.
Wade.
I was going to ask that next. Great.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, hi, this is Wade Sorensen from 1456 Sophia Drive here in Chaska. I want to focus my comments on the zoning ordinance change. High level is, yes, this is a better option than what was previously proposed, I think last month, which the city council rejected in the end. So this is definitely a better option. It is still somewhat of a sledgehammer being taken to the zoning ordinance. I would encourage you guys to consider not changing the overall PCD definition, but you already are looking at changing the PCD 15 definition to allow utility brick. So why wouldn't you also just update the PCD 15 to allow different FAR and setbacks for residential properties within there. That way you're not setting precedents, you're not allowing the overarching PCD to ignore FAR and setbacks. So that would be my one suggestion, is again, not to do it at the high level of the PCD, but why not change it to PCD 15 specifically? That way you truly are taking the scalpel to this versus taking the sledgehammer. So just please consider that option. I think that might give a better long-term safety for the city. Thank you.
Thank you. So expanding on that, would you, I guess, clarify the difference?
Sure, I can explain why we went in this direction. We did consider the direction that Mr. Sorensen is discussing. We did talk about that. We did think about that as staff. The challenge with that direction is that the zoning code, the planned commercial district section of the zoning code in there states that we shall utilize, shall reference to the planned residential district section of the code for residential uses in a PCD. And so that takes off of the table the ability to do it to make that
PCD 15.
PCD 15 change. We need to change the ordinance so that we are no longer required through the shall, right, to make that reference. So that's the difference.
Have a superseding effect.
Correct, right. And that's kind of the route to, a lot of what we talked about. I think it was it last month or a couple months ago when we were talking about changes to planned districts as a whole, right, where we were trying to talk about that shift from shall to should and providing some more discretion and things like that. Council, in their review felt like they weren't quite ready to take that step, and they wanted the zoning audit that's taking place to help inform that a little bit more and have a little bit more opportunity for discussion. So that's where that ended up getting tabled. But this is a more focused way of looking at our ordinance and making that change. Again, I would remind you all that this is really specific to planned commercial districts for which there's only a handful that exist anyway. And there's, within them, I'm not aware, there may be one parcel out there somewhere that's still developable, but it's a pretty small parcel, and that district is also pretty narrowly tailored, that we'd be looking at revising that district to allow for a residential to occur on that site. So it is, in my perspective, my opinion, a very narrow change that we're talking about here.
Okay. I do feel it seems narrow. I feel like it was a very specific approach. Is anyone else in the public hearing still open? Is there anybody else that would like to speak to the commission?
I'm not seeing any other hands raised.
Okay. So at 7:44, I'll close the public hearing. And then bring it back to commission for final discussion. If there's anything we'd like to discuss or any questions for the city?
Yeah, I think it's a great spot, and you kind of reiterate Commissioner Urbanski there that I think it's really got some upside and an enhancement to that area of Chaska, and I think that there'll be high demand for this, and it's a lifestyle that many people are seeking out, whether you're various ages. I think so.
Yeah, I agree. I guess before we go to vote, I do feel like it's a good project. I've been involved in it personally on a professional side on some projects like this where we've done apartment buildings in a commercial area, and it's been very successful. You see it around town, and I think it's a good addition to Chaska that brings more families, more residents here in an area that's been tough. It's been a site that's been sitting for a long time. And the retail landscape, it doesn't seem as if it's going to get any better.
Right.
And so to utilize it and figure out a strategic way to help grow the city, I think it's a great project. So I guess with that, you
Yeah,
can
just
put,
one-
oh, go
I
ahead.
just want to add one comment here.
Yep.
I see like a tot here, that is, I mean, after so many projects, we see that.
Yeah.
And we are glad to see that one. Developer did a good job to add that one in that place. I mean, it's like, they can simply say it's like kind of a mixed district, so they can just eliminate that because
Yeah.
next to that, all are commercial buildings, but they added that. I think we are really glad to see that, yeah.
Yeah, I think they did a great job with the open space, the livability of it, the different areas. To be able to incorporate that on the site, which was kind of sandwiched in there and in the commercial district, it was good to see.
I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the Hazeltine Plaza Apartments Final Site and Building Plan, PC number 2022-54, subject to the following 11 conditions.
Do I hear a second?
I second.
Second, Baswa. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We will need a second motion for the next item.
I'll make the motion to recommend the approval of the zoning ordinance amendment to PCD 15 per the draft ordinance.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Then we will need a third motion.
I can make a motion to recommend approval of the zoning ordinance amendment to section 15.16.030 planned commercial development district per draft ordinance.
Is there a second?
Second.
A second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Other business, receive other meeting minutes. I think
Received.
we'll just go ahead and receive those. Received. Okay. And then receive the well, is that all in one? I think that's all in one, right? Receive both, all those minutes together?
That's all you need to do for
All we
that
need to
one.
do, received them all.
Yep.
That's it? So anything?
There's other
open
business too.
table
Yep.
you'd like to discuss, yeah?
Real quick, we had another meeting last week on the community center. We've taken a ton of public comments. We had a great open house earlier this summer. Our next meeting will actually be more of a design stage meeting, so we'll start to see some sketches of what could be some of the changes there. Like everything else, we're fighting with budget constraints and such, but pretty excited about what will be coming out of that. I haven't seen any of the preliminary sketches yet. That'll be our next meeting. And then shortly after that, we'll have, it sounds like some sort of public open house again so that we can get feedback from the public on these sketches as well. So ongoing.
Great. Anybody else? Anything? No?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Can I make the motion to adjourn? Or someone make a motion to adjourn?
I think it needs
Made
to be
motion
someone
to-
else
Oh, you made a
technically.
motion to,
Yep, that was
okay,
my
second? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned